Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaronism, back with another video for you today. So here we go again. I honestly thought I'd never have to see Armoured Skeptic struggle through another attempt at debunking Flat Earth. Well, I was wrong. Again, the Armored one, Sir Skeptizip, made a video, and I'm unsure as to whether it's supposed to be funny or if he's really trying to be informative. He certainly missed his goal, unless that goal was supposed to be a poorly researched public affirmation of the scientism creed. Anyway, here we go.
Baby better papa bear, baby better papa bear, do you read over?
Okay, I'll spare you that opening, because I don't know what seemed like years, where he goes back and forth with a mama bear and a baby bear and saying over. Anyway, it's terrible. He's discussing the Bedford level experiment, which he butchers, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But to start, we first have to discuss how far the Armored one has fallen off the skeptic path. Let's look at the definition of skeptic. Alright, skeptic, a person who questions the validity or authenticity of something purporting to be factual. Okay, it seems to make sense, but what I think he thinks it says is a skeptic is one who questions and makes fun of anything that the mainstream citizen-funded science claims is untrue or pseudoscience, and an unwavering adherence to the religion of scientism. Belief in the unbelievable simply because science says it's true. A devout follower of the faith. Now, before we get going, one of the main reasons this video is important is because by the end of it, you will 100% understand the Bedford level experiment and why it went badly. You will also see Dave Moore do an excellent job on a late-night talk show. His channel is linked in the description. And you will get to also see what kind of a religious nut Armoured is. And by the end of the video, you'll be able to see why he's going to have to change his name going forward to simply Armoured. And this place here is hiring if Armoured runs out of Christians to bash. Now, let us begin.
So in my search for some conspiracy-level things to debunk, I found this hilarious show.
What about the people in Australia? They're standing on the bottom of the globe, won't they fall off?
So we're in for quite the ride.
I don't know about you guys, but it's becoming comical to me to see these people who basically have been told they can live on a ball. That's it. Not shown, just told in school we can all live on a ball because the gravity pulls us to the center. There's no up and down in space, which makes a lot of sense. That people can just laugh at somebody, laugh it up. Believe me, Sir Skeptibit, that there are more and more people every single day who are laughing at you. Okay, we can totally live on a ball. I'm sure. Freemasons, they say so. Because there's no up and down in space, remember? Gravity pulls everything to the center. Okay, except helium balloons. Those get to defy gravity. And boats on the bottom, they're not really on the bottom. See, they're at the top. Same with people in Australia. You think they're at the bottom, but to them, they think you're on the bottom. Because they're on the top, but I'm on the top. And you're on the top, and so is that guy over there, he's on the top. Everybody's below my horizon, everybody's below your horizon. This isn't metaphysical at all. This is reality. Science!
If a pilot is flying around the curve of the Earth, then he should be dipping the nose down. Every 5 minutes he should be dipping the nose down to stay around the curve.
Yeah, and who's to say that he's not? Planes have to make constant adjustments to stay level. Between wind, turbulence, and topographical changes, planes are constantly adjusting their pitch.
Oh man, that's some great evidence. Thanks, Skeptic. We got it now.
If a plane has a gyroscope and it starts following the curve of the Earth, the gyroscope would stay upright, which means the artificial horizon will start to roll backwards. But it doesn't. That's absolute proof that a plane flies over a flat surface rather than a curved one.
No, you absolute silly goose. That's not how gravity works. Gravity is a result of Earth. It doesn't work independent of the Earth.
Because I asked the pilot on my last flight, did you ever notice the artificial horizon rolling backwards? He said, no, but the artificial horizon has complex electronics in it to make sure it knows where it is on the Earth and it compensates. But I went to the manufacturer of the artificial horizon and they confirmed to me that it's completely mechanical, nothing electronic in it whatsoever. So it's literally just a gyroscope that can freely move. That right there is proof to me that planes fly over a plane.
That anecdote doesn't make any sense. So you found a pilot who doesn't know how gravity works or his equipment works. That doesn't mean that the planet is flat.
Of course. Because the non-pilot, non-PhD, non-seeker of truth, the religious dogmatist, the armored skeptic says so. I mean, come on. If somebody is skeptical, wouldn't they do actual research? Not just looking into what does the mainstream say is true, because I got to repeat that. So what is it, Armored? You afraid to look into truth? If not, then please do the research that needs to be done so that you can understand the truth behind flights and gyroscopes. I mean, there's so much truth out there. You just have to take a little break from making fun of Christians. Just take a little break from it. Look into the other stuff available to you. You'll be very shocked at what Flat Earth has brought to the table. For example, we've had the following people come forward with Flat Earth facts.
The subject matter experts we've had so far: United States Navy missile instructor, Air Force navigator, Marine Corps sniper instructor, Navy submarine chief, Army artillery radar operator, Australian intelligence officer, American flight instructor, industrial engineer specializing in valves and seals, careers surveyor of over 32 years, that's a planer surveyor, not that geodetic crap, international shipping expert, corporate travel agent, air traffic controller, United States Army master gunner, aviation and ground training combat expert, USDA surveyor, also a planer surveyor, 32nd degree Mason, etheric science researcher, and tonight it is going to be a commercial airline pilot captain who's going to talk about the gyro system. So let's get right to it, shall we?
If you haven't got to hear that yet, I highly recommend it. You just need to click the screen now to go to that video. It consists of a pilot telling us some interesting facts about the gyroscope and who's in charge and what happens when they go down. So check it out.
Problem is that we're taught as children this ball earth lie.
Oh,
What? What? Did I miss the punchline again? It's just, why do I remember you being funny? I just remember last time you being funny. I don't know. I think you have a little bit too much shoe on the head.
You might ask as a child, what about the people in Australia? They're standing on the bottom of the globe, won't they fall off? And your teacher says, no, gravity. And you go, oh, okay. And you never go back to that question.
yes, because you have a child's mind and children don't understand how gravity works. But then you grow up.
But when you go back to it as an adult and start looking at it with a critical eye, the whole thing falls apart.
Only if you never learn how gravity works.
And you know how gravity works? So the PhDs who specialize in this kind of thing, they can't tell us what gravity is, but you understand it. You can tell us what gravity is. Try this one. Show me one time, just once, in a lab, in a vacuum, a ball spinning, holding water to the surface of that ball via gravity. I'm not even asking for multiple times, which science would require anyway, it being repeatable. I'm just asking you one time. Just show me it once in a lab. Go ahead, Sir Skeptibit. Show us. Oh yeah, you might want to talk to your hero about gravity.
What is gravity?
You have no idea. Okay, next question.
Wow.
No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. We can say what it does to other things. We can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know.
The thing about the spinning Earth is looking at the stars. Directly above the axis of spin is the pole star, Polaris, directly over the North Pole. And we're told that the reason that all the stars spin around the North Star is because the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour.
Do you have any idea how far away those stars are?
I think a better question is, do you know how far those stars are? Are they suns? How do you know? Because someone told you. Point for Armored Skeptic. He sure is skeptical.
This is another one of those things that flat earthers tend to completely throw out of their equations. Polaris, for example, is somewhere between 350 and 450 light years away. They're not entirely sure. Polaris, for example, is somewhere between 350 and 450 light years away.
All right, let's think about this one for a second. Polaris is somewhere between 350 and 450 light years away. So these astrophysicists and cosmologists that you follow blindly tell us that the North Star is 350 to 450 light years away. They aren't entirely sure. Well, I mean, that's not a big deal, right? It's only 100 light years that they're off one way or the other. Can't be very many. I mean, a light year is 6 trillion miles times 100. That's 600 trillion miles. 600 trillion miles. All right, so let's discuss this 600 trillion miles. I mean, that's just the amount they're unsure of. So watch this pitch. Okay, this is coming at 100 miles per hour. All right, keep your eye on it. So let's watch the next one so we can get an idea of how fast 100 miles per hour is. Let's look how fast this ball is moving. Wow, that is coming in there really quick. All right, so one more time, let's watch this last pitch so we can get an idea of exactly how fast that moves. All right, so we got that ball moving 100 miles per hour, which would mean in a day it would go 2,400 miles. That's about the distance across the United States. So if we wanted to look at a year, in a year it would go 876,000 miles in 1 year. Okay, so the distance of 600 trillion miles, that would only take that ball 684,931,506 years. So again, a ball going as fast as we just saw it would take 684 million years to just go the distance that science says, Polaris, it's either 350 or 450. You know, it's in between. All right, maybe there's an easier way to show it. Let's try a trip from Los Angeles to New York. Okay, and let's say we're going on a brand new super duper plane. It's never been released before. And this trip, which is 5,000 miles round trip, we can get from LA to New York and from New York back to LA in just 5 minutes. That's how quickly we're moving. In just 5 minutes, we can go LA to New York to LA. Okay? So if we just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it would take a ridiculous 120 billion round trips to make up 600 trillion miles in distance. And if you did nothing but fly on that plane back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, there and back in 5 minutes, it would take you 1,141,552 years of travel just to cover the distance that science says, well, we don't really know. Yeah, it's in between, one or the other. And yet, Sir Skeptilit thinks that this is the people he needs to listen to. The almighty physicists and cosmologists. Yes, please, guys, tell me how far the stars are and if they're really suns.
The sun, for example, is so far away that if you walk from one side of the city to the other, you're not going to see the sun move from one side of the sky to the other because the sun is so far away. In that same way, moving a few thousand miles isn't going to change the position of a star in the sky because those stars are so far away.
And how do you know how far away the sun is again? You said so. Oh, that's right, because someone told you. How could I forget? Mr. Skeptic doesn't believe in research. Nobody is saying, Sir Skeptibit, that the star would move because Earth has traveled a few thousand miles. Just so you know, in an hour, we just went 66,000 miles. So nobody's saying the star should move because we went in orbit for an hour. Okay, with Earth going 66,000 miles per hour and also going 480,000 miles per hour and also going 2.2 million miles per hour. So, with the Earth going 2.2 million miles per hour times 24 is 52.8 million times 365 is 19.2 billion with a B. That's 19.2 billion miles traveled per year. And yet Polaris remains in the same spot year after year after year after year. So my question is to you, can you stop setting up straw man arguments? Nobody's saying that any star should move because we moved a few thousand miles. What we are saying is pay attention If we're moving 19.2 billion miles in a year, then there's no way that Polaris would stay where it is in the sky every single year after century.
The thing is, what the scientists will give you is calculations and theories why that happens. But we have experience. We see things and they either make sense or they don't make sense. What the scientists do is substitute our common sense and our intuition for calculations and theory, and we're supposed to believe the calculations rather than what we experience ourselves.
Yes, because our observational skills and our intuition are a result of millions of years of evolution. We didn't evolve to understand the universe and physics. We evolved to understand and survive in our environment. It took the development of science, math, physics to better understand how the things around us work, because they are counter to our intuition.
Oh boy, please don't tell me he said it. Did he say evolution? Evolution? Oh boy, how long will it take for people to realize that science can no longer be seen as the great end-all be-all that it once was? Science must be given back to the people and taken away from those who just want fame, fortune, and riches. When science is funded by taxpayers and corrupt politicians are the ones handing out the money, and those doing the science that benefits the government and benefits big banks or corporate direction, they get all the money, and the experiments yielding the desired results are the ones that get the instant and big dollars. We have a major issue. Huge. Because remember, science is a systematic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe. Okay, evolution. Got it. Let me call my good buddy Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence, can you tell us if there's any debate at all between the ideas of evolution and intelligent design?
There is no, it's just invented. There's no such thing, there's no controversy. There's a public controversy about an issue that doesn't exist.
Oh.
First, I want to, however, make a disclaimer, or not a disclaimer, I want to make a statement of fact. That evolution is a fact. There's no discussion, there's no debate, there's no nothing. It's one of the most successful and impressive scientific theories of all time. We physicists have done a con job. We've convinced everyone that Einstein was the greatest scientist, or Newton, or something like that. But in fact, I'm pretty convinced when you look at the person who single-handedly changed our thinking about the world, the greatest, I think it was Darwin. And the biologists just aren't as good at self-promotion, I guess. It's been based on over a century of observation, prediction, testing, all the hallmarks of good science. Okay, so let's lay that issue.
Here's the problem. These so-called skeptics think that by doubting everything science says is false and believing and trusting all things science say is true, that they are showing a high level of skepticism. This is the trick that has pulled the wool over the eyes of many. They even think that they are smart by simply following this formula. If science says it's crap, then I think it's crap too. Science says that we orbit the Great Attractor, which is 100 quadrillion times the size of the sun. Well, I say we are too. Look at me, aren't I smart? I can repeat stuff just like a parrot. Stupid flat earthers. Don't you idiots know that science says flat earth is... Well, you see, the problem is that as human beings, we are no longer allowed to think for ourselves. The intellectuals have done it all for us. How convenient. And so now, evolution is one of the most successful and impressive scientific theories of all time, and it is backed by over a century of observation, prediction, and testing. Are you the least bit skeptical about evolution? Tell me one time that a species has evolved into a new species. The entire thing is a ridiculous belief, and those who believe it actually think that they are smart. I mean, the process of natural selection is not an evolutionary process. Plants and animals allow selective breeding to get desired results. Dogs will go through selective breeding, so we can get a desired trait by selecting dogs with a trait to produce offspring with that trait. This selective breeding can go on and on for generation after generation until a breed of dog is developed. This is the same as the survival of the fittest theory of the evolutionists. Many types of dogs can be made this way, but we can never make a cat by breeding dogs. Natural selection cannot extend outside of the DNA, and DNA cannot be changed into a new species by natural selection. The same process of selective breeding is done with flowers, fruits, and vegetables. So yes, new variations of species are possible, but a new species has never, I repeat ever, been developed by science ever. Like all the atheist science fanboys can't admit that there's no species that has ever been proven to have evolved in any way at all. Evolution is a joke of a belief, and it alone gives science a shitty name. If your ridiculous theory were actually true, then Eskimos would have fur. They don't. Humans in the tropics would have reflective skin. They don't. In fact, they have black skin. Just the opposite of what the theory of natural selection predicts. And yet, somebody like Armoured Skeptic, who considers himself a skeptic, will never take a look at evolution. Never. Why? Because science says it's true, and you wouldn't dare go against science. Let's take a look at the book On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection by Charles Darwin. Let's look first at the title. On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Well, already the title is false. There is no origin of species by means of natural selection. It's never been shown. It's never happened. Not in any lab, not in any test. The second part of the title, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Darwin was a believer that eventually most of the races on Earth, the savage races, would be exterminated by the preferred races. Whether he sees it or not, Sir Skeptibit is now nothing more than a mouthpiece for the establishment. Call him a priest, if you will. Father Armoured Skeptic. You see, science has always had an agenda, and if you think that agenda has anything to do with you or I, you're very wrong. Citing a New York Times article, a scientific paper a day is retracted due to misconduct, and 2% of scientists admit to falsifying their data. So if 2% admit it, how many do you think don't admit it? You see, science and skeptics glorify and worship peer-reviewed papers in scientific journals, and the industry sees them as the ultimate marker of individual productivity. Scientists see the journals as the pinnacle of success, and they'll cut corners, or even worse, for a shot at the fame and glory. The incentives to publish today are corrupting the scientific literature and the media that covers it.
Here's how science is done. Often. Not always, but often. The good thing is to start out with a novel claim. It's not required, but it helps. And then we do. Well, then you do research. What's research? You do the thing that Feynman said. You try and prove this idea right, and then you try and prove it wrong. Okay? And then, if you're convinced the idea has merit, then you submit it to a journal. What happens? It gets sent out for peer review. What's that? Well, that means it gets sent to idiots. And they come back and they explain to you, without having read the piece really, what they think is wrong and why they weren't referenced. And then you write back to them using small words. And then maybe, if you're lucky, the thing is published. But lots of garbage gets published in every issue of Physical Journal, Physical Letters, or any major journal. There's lots of garbage. Doesn't matter. Okay? Remember that at least 50% of the populace doesn't believe in evolution. In fact, it's worse than that. Let me show you a really, really scary statistic from 2005. So when people were asked, regardless of what you believe personally, which of these do you believe should be taught in public schools?
I'm sorry, that's just got to be the funniest thing of all time. Regardless of what you may personally believe, which of these do you believe should be taught in public schools? How do you answer that question? Anyway.
12% of the American public said evolution only. Almost twice as many Americans said only creationism should be taught in the public schools, and then the rest of Americans said everything. Okay? Open-mindedness. So it's really clear that by far a majority of Americans would like to, at the very least, teach more than evolution or teach no evolution. Okay? So more than 50% of people feel that way. So shouldn't we therefore teach it? Well, I just want to remind you of one of the statistics I presented to you earlier. 50% of American adults know that the Earth orbits the Sun and takes a year to do it. Does that mean, therefore, that we should teach the Earth-centric cosmology in physics classes? Because after all, 50% of Americans think the Sun orbits the Earth. When you present it that way, the answer is obvious. Of course not.
Did you see the programming? Did you hear it? The laughs, the snickers. Oh boy, the Sun orbits the Earth. Yeah, right. Science already told us the truth.
Do you know how long it takes for the light to get from the center of the Sun to the outside of the Sun? Okay, about 1 million years. Takes the light. So every bit of light that's emitted from the surface of the Sun originated in a nuclear reaction 1 million years earlier. Okay? So we really are doing historical science when we look at the sun. We're looking at the energy that was emitted 1 million years earlier. And by the way, if the solar system and the Earth were 10,000 years old, the light wouldn't have made it out to the surface, okay? So we already know. I like to every week I like to think of another thing that refutes the 10,000-year-old idiots, and so anyway, I want to just point out that every scientific claim, every single one that's been made, from the genetic relationships between humans and chimpanzees to the non-existence of transitional fossils to the evolution of bacterial flagellum to the nature of blood clotting, every supposed challenge to evolutionary biology has in fact been proved wrong.
Erroneous! Erroneous! Erroneous on both counts.
And this is a guy you're going to listen to for the truth. Every scientific challenge to evolutionary biology has in fact been proved wrong. Now, back to Armoured Skeptic. A few things that we can point out that are obviously true. Number one would be that he does not believe in chemtrails. That would be known because he believes in science. He's not skeptical because whatever science says, he says. The Armoured Skeptic also believes in climate change. Easy to realize that because science says it exists, therefore the Armoured Skeptic says it exists. Another one would be the Armoured Skeptic is not an anti-vaxxer. Absolutely not. Science says vaccines are needed, they're important, they're harmless, and therefore Armoured Skeptic says the same. But let's look a little bit deeper into this vaccination thing just so we can compare it to other bits of science. The movie that came out, Vaxxed, if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you do, brings to light the very problems that we see with the scientific journals. Because you will see why it is causing such an outrage. The media and science will tell you that the link between autism and vaccinations has been debunked. The original scientific journal that published the connection in 1998 has since retracted the paper, and the doctor who wrote the study had his medical license pulled. Now, either A, he committed fraud using the scientific journal, or B, he didn't, and science has pulled the reports and committed its own version of fraud. Either way, there is a huge problem. These scientists will either post crap for money, or they will lie and put people in danger for money. Either one should be obvious that there is a problem with the way we operate in science. Now, whatever the case, no one will argue with the fact that cases of autism are way up. And it's clear that children are sick. Autism, asthma, diabetes, ADHD, ADD, cancer, and it all leads back to the immune system. And I don't know about you, but I can think of one thing that can change a healthy baby's immune system. This issue is a simple one in my book. It's people who can think versus those that can't. It's people who can see through the fog and those who can't. It's people who are truly skeptical and those who use the word but don't have the brain to think for themselves, which is a requirement of being a skeptic. When we look at the big science frauds, we should start with the conflict of interest between corporations and governments, such as the revolving door of Monsanto employees working in the FDA and the USDA. Now, remember that study that showed vaccines were linked to autism? And many people have used this as a means of demonstrating that there is fraud in science. They also claim that the man took money to post the results, but what fails to get mentioned is the list I have here on the screen of the other studies that supported the original findings of that study. So please look into these and you'll understand why it's important to be skeptical of everything. But I mean really skeptical, not armored skeptical. So now let us continue and see if we can notice any signs of true skepticism from the armored one.
It's a famous experiment back in the 1800s in England called the Bedford Levels experiment. The Bedford Levels is a canal that is perfectly straight for 6 miles. What a chap called Samuel Rowbottom did was he took a telescope, put it in the water about 8 inches above the water, and he had a friend in a rowboat with a flag on the back row all the way to the other end, and he was able to see the flag on the back of the rowboat the whole distance. According to spherical trigonometry, the curve of the Earth is 8 inches per per mile squared. So over 5 miles, that's 5 times 525 times 8, which is 200 inches, which works out at 16 feet. That means the boat should have been 16 feet below the horizon. He shouldn't have been able to see the boat.
The problem is that Samuel Rowbotham's experiment was hardly scientific. He didn't factor in any kind of variables. He didn't set up any kind of measurement tool to prove that the boat was still on the same plane. All he proved is that he could still see the boat, which really tells us very little.
Yeah, obviously too much to ask. Science says Rowbotham was wrong. Skeptibit says he was wrong. Hardly scientific. Didn't factor in variables. Didn't use measurement tools. And you can bet your last dollar that if it was science who did the test, he would have no issues with the way the test was done.
Scientists will say, oh, refraction and this and light bending around the Earth and stuff. But the fact is, it's perfectly flat, and in his book he puts forward many, many arguments that show, many experiments that show the Earth is always perfectly flat.
Exactly. It's a well-known fact that light only travels in a straight line in a vacuum. You add in any other factors like gases, liquids, gravity, the light is going to change direction, sometimes only slightly and sometimes by a lot. Everybody knows that if you jab a stick into the water, that stick changes direction as soon as it crosses the surface. That's because light is refracting through that water. In the same way that light changes direction in water, it also changes direction in atmospheres. But of course, because an atmosphere is much more diluted than water, the change is much more gradual and slight. We have every reason to believe that Samuel Rowbotham actually knew about light refraction, because that was something that land surveyors would factor into their calculations at the time. In fact, his experiment was set up specifically to capitalize on the way that light refracts. The colder and denser the air, the more it curves downwards. That means something that was, say, 6 miles away, the light from it would curve downwards back towards an observer, making the object appear several feet above where it actually is. A separate man, Alfred Russel Wallace, revisited this experiment but added in a way to measure the difference in an observation as it relates to distance. He set up 3 poles. He set up his telescope at the first pole, the second pole was 3 miles away, and the third pole was 6 miles away. And what he observed was that the pole that was closest to him actually appeared lower down than the pole that was furthest away from him, which appeared to be higher up, which is not only impossible on a round Earth, but is also impossible on a flat Earth. So what this suggests is that light can change direction over great distances. Boom, pwned.
Now, let's take a look at this because I'm calling Armored out for making something up. Where did you get those test results, Mr. Skeptic? No test was ever done with 3 poles, where the middle pole was lower and the further pole was higher. Certainly not by Alfred Wallace. Certainly nothing to do with the Bedford level experiment of Lady Blount, Rowbotham, Wallace, Hampton. So please tell us where you got that nonsense, because it never happened. Let's discuss some of these problems that Father Skeptic is having. Number 1, he's unaware that he believes in a religion. He thinks that he's smart because he follows along the scientific protocol. Number 2, he will deny any evidence from anyone saying the Earth is flat, but accept any evidence from anyone saying it isn't. That's not skepticism, that's a religion. Number 3, he has a clear bias and because of it cannot see that he can no longer call himself a skeptic. That's pretty self-explanatory. His name from now on should be Armored. Number 4, as I stated, he made up or is explaining an experiment that never took place, and the results of which I don't know where he got them from. Number 5, he is doing no experiments himself, simply believing the status quo and what science tells him to say. Number 6, he is showing us that he is a follower and certainly not a leader. He has no leadership qualities, he simply wants to follow whatever will make him look smart and allow him to laugh at people that he doesn't see as smart because they don't follow the scientific program. Number 7, he has low self-esteem and is afraid to go out on a ledge. This is something that's been seen in the fanboy community. They are afraid to ever go against status quo. Heaven forbid somebody laugh at them or call them an idiot. Number 8, if everyone laughs at flat earthers, they must be wrong. And it's fun to laugh at people, so he decided to join in. That's all this guy does. So again, for the record, and then I'll show you the experiment done by Wallace. But he has a telescope here looking at a pole, and then a pole in the middle is lower, and the pole at the end is higher. Never happened, it's never been reported in any of the books I've read about the Bedford level experiment, so not sure where he got that. I think he made it up. And so if you wouldn't mind, Skeptic, I would appreciate it if you would cite your study for the basis of this entire video you made, because I think it's without merit. So let me go ahead and explain the order of events. This test or series of events took place at the Bedford Canal, and there is a section there that is 6 miles and very straight. And as Robotham stated, if the Earth is a globe at 25,000 statute miles in circumference, the surface of all standing water must have a certain degree of convexity. Every part must be part of an arc of a circle. Now you'll hear people talk about refraction, because atmospheric refraction can produce the results noted by Robotham and Blount. Because of the density of the air of the Earth's atmosphere, it decreases with height above the Earth's surface. All light rays traveling nearly horizontally bend downward, assuming a curve or change in air temperature along the line of sight. This phenomenon is routinely allowed for in leveling and celestial navigation. Now, this is an important point here. Note what this says to those of you that are actually skeptical. If the measurement is close enough to the surface, light rays can curve downward at a rate equal to the mean curvature of the Earth's surface. In this case, the two effects of assumed curvature and refraction could cancel each other out, and the Earth will appear flat in optical experiments. It's another way that they can get this over on you. Science is flat out lying to you. Period.
So as far as I'm concerned, I've had enough of science. I've had enough of all this doctors and PhDs. I know what's going on here. We've been lied to, and I mean big time.
So the way the story goes is Robotham was the first one to do the experiment. He did it with a guy in a boat. He was 8 inches above the water, and he saw the guy at the boat with the flag all the way down the 6-mile stretch of the Bedford Canal. Now I'm going to read you the words straight out of the book written by Wallace so we can understand what his version of the test was and see how it matches in no way what Skeptic said. The iron parapet of Welney Bridge was 13 feet 3 inches above the water of the canal. The old Bedford Bridge, about 6 miles off, was of brick and somewhat higher. On this bridge, I fixed a large sheet of white calico 6 feet long and 3 feet deep, with a thick black band along the center, the lower edge of which was the same height from the water as the parapet of Welney Bridge, so that the center of it would be as high as the line of sight of the large 6-inch telescope I had brought with me. At the center point, about 3 miles from each bridge, I fixed up a long pole with 2 red discs on it, the upper one having its center the same height above the water as the center of the black band and of the telescope, while the second disc was 4 feet lower down. It is evident that if the surface of water is a perfectly straight line for 6 miles, then the 3 objects, the telescope, the top disc, and the black band, being all exactly the same height above the water, the disc would be seen in the telescope projected upon the black band, whereas if the 6-mile surface of the water is convexly curved, then the top disc would appear to be decidedly higher than the black band, the amount due to the known size of the Earth being 5 feet 8 inches, which amount would be reduced a little by the refraction to perhaps about 5 feet. Now, after a failed test, Wallace says in his book that he borrowed a level from a surveyor, and again he set up the experiment. They put the calico flag on the bridge, leveled the scope, and then had the judges draw what they saw through the telescope lens. Now, when the results came back, Mr. Hampton declined to look through either telescope, saying he trusted it to Mr. Carpenter, while the latter declared positively that they had won and that we knew it, that the fact that the distant signal appeared below the middle one as far as the middle one did below the crosshair proved that the 3 were in a straight line and that the Earth was flat, and he rejected the view in the large telescope as proving nothing for the reasons already stated. So not sure where Skeptic has any kind of results, being that the middle stick was down below and the far stick was high above. It's not the way this test turned out. Here's a drawing showing exactly what they saw, and this is drawn by the 2 judges, and in his book this actually is shown upside down, so I'm about to show you what the book actually shows. So there you see what each judge saw, and these 2 views as seen by means of the inverted telescope are exactly representations of these sketches. Alright, and now the explanation of the Bedford level experiment. Once you look at all the facts, you'll see how this has become a huge globe earther idea of proof of convexity. when in actuality it is, like so many other true scientific tests, proof that the Earth is a level plane. So with this first image, let's look at the huge red flag right in front of us. Look at figure 1. Do items stand up on the Earth like that, like the 2 poles? No. They stand perpendicular to the Earth. And again, if you take a look, you'll see that the way they have this set up, the Earth would be going up and away from the 2 people standing at the 2 sticks. Of course, the more likely choice is figure 2, showing what would happen on a level plane. Now here's the drawing that will lead Globers to believe that this is proof that the Earth is curved. This is what they saw in the test. It was drawn by both judges, and you can see how both discs were above the white piece of paper with the black band. Now, there's a reason for this, and we need to think here for a second. Say you're looking out at this beach here, you're looking out at the horizon, and you decide to pull out a telescope. Well, the telescope, once leveled at your location, would show this. It would show that the horizon line is below the crosshairs of the telescope. If you instead took a black tube, say a toilet paper roll or a paper towel roll, and were to look through that, and it was leveled, this is what you would see. Now, let's actually talk about the Bedford level experiment. Here we are, looking at the Bedford level, starting at Welney Bridge here. You'll see I've sectioned this off. We've got a 6-mile stretch, straight as an arrow. And now we've turned the page here so you can see that I found a middle point that was 3.39 miles from Welney. So we've got that little middle section there. And we're also going to be finishing off the line with the 2.60 mile stretch on the other side. And this is just to show you exactly what we're going to do in figuring out what happened in the Bedford level experiment. I took from the middle point and drew a line across. So what we're kind of making here is a plus sign or a cross. And then I took that same thing and threw it 3 miles out the other way. And that gives us a cross with basically 4 arms off the middle point, each of the arms being about 3 miles. One's 3.3 and one's 2.6 or whatever. So you can look at that here. We have Welney Bridge. We have approximately the middle. We've got the Welch's Dam. And then we've got on the right side, side A. On the left side, side B. Now we've got 4 people that are going to help us out. We can just know them as redhead, blonde girl, hat guy, and bald guy. Okay, they're going to be assisting us in our little experiment today with the bald guy at Welch's Dam, the blonde girl at side A, the redhead at Welney Bridge, and the guy with a hat at side B. Nobody in the middle. All right, and this view here is from the Welch's, and you're looking straight down the straight shot of the Bedford level. And let's explain why what happened. This is the view that you would get from the other side, the Welney Bridge. You can see that it's a little bit overgrown there. Here we are looking from side B. That's where the guy with the hat will be. And here we are looking at side A, where the blonde girl will be. All right, so here we are at Welch's. We've now got our assistant, Mr. Baldman, and we are going to be looking down this stretch and realizing exactly what happened during the Bedford level experiment. So to begin, we do have each person at their respective stations ready to go. Of course, the Bedford level experiment was just the 2 locations on the river, but we're going to be adding something to prove a point. Okay, this is the bridge that is in the middle, and we're going to show how, using this white piece of paper with the black band in the middle, we'll notice that that light pole is standing up and the light is in the middle. Okay, and then we know that it's the same height as that white piece of paper with the black band. And we need to realize now that if we are looking from a distance at that pole, say placed in the center, through a telescope, why it is that the bridge appears to be lower than the light. All right, here we are again, back at Welch's, and you'll see this gentleman is looking down a series of lights that I placed on the side of the Bedford Canal. Now, if you took a telescope and you leveled it with the first 2 lights there and pointed it in that direction, you may see the telescope take it all the way down to the horizon. But here's what actually happened in that experiment, and you'll see why it was kind of cheating. Because they removed the first post. Armoured said that they used 3 poles. He said there was one at the telescope, one in the middle, and one far away. When in actuality, at the testing location and at the time of the Bedford level experiment, they removed the first pole and left only the middle pole and the faraway white background. So as you can see here, if we were to level this telescope and we were to aim it directly at that light, that the white board behind there, you can see it way off in the distance, would be lower than the sight on the telescope. It does not mean that the Earth is curved. You can take any experiment and do this yourself. First of all, from Robotham's article here, you'll see a few things, but this is linked in the description if you want this document, this PDF. But Robotham said, from the above, it will be seen that 3 disks were to have been used, one immediately near the telescope, one in the middle, or 3 miles from the telescope, and one at the end of 6 miles. Now, clearly, the conditions of the experiment were not carried out. At the end of 6 miles, instead of a disk, an oblong flag was placed. A disk was erected in the middle portion only, and nothing whatsoever was fixed close to the telescope. Thus, the agreement was completely violated. Those who suggested and those who were idly and carelessly present and agreed to such a procedure were alike greatly to blame. Now, had a disk 12 feet or any other altitude been placed close to the telescope, another of exactly that same make at the distance of 3 miles, and a third of the same character and altitude at the end of 6 miles, and the telescope placed immediately close to and in the line of sight directed over the first disk, the conditions of the agreement would have been properly fulfilled, and the result would have proved that the water surface to have been equidistant from the line of sight throughout the whole distance of 6 miles. Now, here's Robotham trying to explain exactly why we see what we see, and I will try after that. But basically, let anyone select a long row of lamps of equal altitude and on truly a horizontal ground. Let him elevate himself until he is able to place a telescope just above the first lamp. On directing it along the whole row, he will find the line of sight will pass at the same distance just over each lamp to the end of the series. But let him ignore 1/2 of the lamps immediately nearest to him, and so place the telescope that he must observe the last or farthest lamp, and he will see the intervening lamp standing above the line of sight, the nearest to him apparently the highest, and the degree of elevation more or less according to the power of the telescope. And I recommend you pause this and maybe read that 3rd page on the right at the bottom boxed in red. But let's get on to a little bit of these proofs just so you can better understand. If we had this lady and she's looking down the train tracks, and if we put up a series of red sticks all at her eye height, and we took a telescope and we were to peer down these sticks, but we leveled it at the eye of the observer to 0 degrees, as we see here, do you think that the line from the telescope would stretch from the top of the first stick to the horizon line? The answer is actually no, it would not, because a telescope only zooms in on that particular viewpoint, meaning that you're going to see something a little bit more like this. You're not going to look at the yellow line, you're actually going to see more of the green line take off from that telescope if you were to look through it. Let's go to the other side. Here we've got this guy with the hat. He's got Welney on his left and Welch's on his right. If we did the same thing, we lined up these green sticks looking down to the end. Same thing here. If we lined up the telescope, you'll see how the sticks would start to fall below the axis of the telescope, below the crosshairs. Now, this might normally be called the dip in the horizon, but every scientific surveyor of large experience knows that the very best theodolites and spirit levels require very careful adjustments, that they are all liable to err from various causes, viz. Collimation, parallax, refraction, aberration, spherical confusion, and chromatic dispersion, and that when adjusted in the most perfect manner possible, they will still be minute errors in distances of a few hundred yards. In a work entitled A Treatise on Mathematical Instruments by J.F. Heather of the Royal Military College, elaborate directions are given for examining, correcting, and adjusting the collimation, and at page 103, these directions are concluded by the following words. Quote, "The instrument will now be in complete practical adjustment for any distance not exceeding 10 chains, the maximum error being only 1/100th of a foot. The principal instrumental error is that of collimation, or slight divergence from the true axis of the eye, and as this might easily amount to 1/100th of a foot in 10 chains, which is only 220 yards, in the most perfect instrument, when manipulated by the most seasoned of surveyors, we see at once the cause of the appearance in the diagram figure 3. The top of the disc on the signal pole 3 miles away appears to be 1/16th of an inch below the crosshair. The center of the signal flag, placed against the bridge 6 miles away, is 5/16ths of an inch below the crosshair. It has already been shown that these distances below the crosshair are not such as could have been appeared from downward curvature in the water. It is now demonstrable that they were the result of inevitable collimation and unavoidable divergence of the pencils of light passing through the glasses of the instrument, and we have seen, by the quotation by Mr. Heather's work, this divergence cannot be prevented. And although they might be 1/100th of a foot and 220 yards, how much greater would that be in distances of 3 and 6 miles? Here now, Robotham gives us a experiment to do. He said, "So important is the explanation that I deem it right to offer the reader a simple demonstration. Let him find a piece of ground, a terrace or a promenade, line of railway or an embankment, which shall be perfectly horizontal for, say, 500 yards. Let a signal staff 5 feet high be erected at one end, and a theodolite or spirit level fixed and carefully adjusted to exactly the same altitude at the other end. The top of the signal will then be seen a little below the crosshair, although it has the same actual altitude and stands upon the same horizontal foundation. If the position of the signal staff and the spirit level be then reversed, the same result will follow. Another proof will be found in the following experiment." You can pause that and read it if you'd like. Here's another way to look at things. Ask a geodetic surveyor, ask Jesse Kozlowski, if when he measures, he always sees the Earth fall away from him, meaning it falls down. That's the truth. So basically, when we have our cross over here near the Bedford level, and we've got this girl looking, she sees the blue line, which is where the river would be. It's a flat, straight, horizontal line. And the green, she could see both people at both ends. Now let's go to the other side. This gentleman sees the same thing, the flat, level, horizontal line, the river, and he would see with both of his eyes, both the person at Welch's and the person at Welney. Here on the Welch's side, we've got the bald guy. He's looking down. He also would measure the Earth falling away from him. So far, all 3 of our participants would measure the Earth falling away from them. And now we've got the redhead who, measuring from Welney, would also see the Earth falling away from her. Anybody here see a problem yet? Would they all meet at a pit in the middle? We have the 2 orange dots representing the people on both ends of the river, the 2 yellow dots representing the 2 people on both sides of the train tracks. How would they all measure the Earth falling between them in the middle? Think of it this way. All right, so let's say we have the United States and we've got a geodetic surveyor in California and one in New York, and they're going to start measuring towards each other. Okay, so they begin to measure each small little distance, and every time they would show the Earth falling away from them, each of them going 1,250 miles. So if we take the 1,250 and we multiply that, the 8 inches times distance squared, so 8 times 1,250 times 1,250, then take that answer, divide it by 12, and then divide by 5280, we get 197 miles of curvature. Now remember, Colorado is a mile high. Very high up in the sky, they're a mile high, yet there's 197 miles of curvature coming from each of those directions. Here's something even more strange. Imagine that one of these people decides they want to do the whole distance themselves instead. So they measure 2,500 miles. Well, now all of a sudden, take 2,500 times 2,500 times 8 divided by 12 divided by 5280, and we get 789 miles of curvature. Well, wouldn't we get 197 plus 197? That's less than 400. It's about half of the exact... Nope. Here, if we added another person in the north and one in the south and had everybody measure and meet in the middle, they would all, again, show the Earth falling into some sort of crevice in the middle of the United States. And here lies the truth that so many people refuse to believe. The idea that we live on a sphere is bogus. It's nonsense. It is explained away with such nonsense as, there is no up or down in space, and each person is at the top of the globe. Well, how are they each at the top if there is no up or down? Who says where the top is? The Earth falls away from the observer because of the way our eyes work, and the fact that our eyes are several feet above the ground where the plane is. So level a telescope and you'll see a drop, no matter what. Why does the Earth never rise? Doesn't make any sense. Where is all this non-existent curvature? Well, I can tell you where it is. And it's in textbooks, and it's in the heads of NASA and science fanboys everywhere. Where it doesn't exist is in reality. Now let me give you a final example of this. Let's take this scene that we're looking at here and imagine that we've got 3 people. Okay, we've got the person in the red on the left, the white in the middle, the blue on the right, and we are the green person. We're up a little bit high. We may be on a mountain. Now we can take a look at the distances that each person is from each other. So, the person that is red is 4 miles away from the person in white, and the red and blue are 8 miles apart. The red and green are 5 miles apart. Blue and white are 4 miles apart. Blue and green, 5 miles apart. And green and white, 4 miles apart. That should make plenty of sense. Now from here, we can imagine what each of these people would be able to see at the distance they are away from each other. Since we are higher up, we can see the whole entire scene in front of us. Correct? Now, let's draw lines of what each person can see. So we are the green mark, and we can see all the way to the blue, we can see all the way to the red, and we can see all the way to the white. Here's the problem. The red heading towards the white, let's say there's a boat going across that blue line there, say that's a river. The person in red would lose the boat there at the purple curve. And the person in blue on the right would lose the boat there at the purple curve. So what we have here is proof that the reason the blue or red cannot see the boat go any further than the purple line, the so-called curvature of Earth, is simply because of the way that we see. We can see the whole scene, being the green guy here. We can see the entire scene and know that no boat is going over any curvature. There is no curvature there. Both people are on a level plane. They just happen to lose sight of the boat because of their eyesight. So one final example, I'm sure you're getting this, or I hope you are. If you just don't pay attention too much to the distance up in the upper right, just kind of look at the idea of the scene. If we had a person in green at one bank and a person in purple on the other bank, and a person at red that could survey the whole scene, as the boat left the purple man and headed towards the green man, the purple man would lose the boat at 3 miles at the purple line there. But the red man would be able to see the entire scene. He would also see that the boat never goes over any curve. The boat goes right along the horizon, reaches the green guy. If the boat turned around and headed back, the green guy would lose the boat at the green line. But again, you have the red guy who sees the whole entire scene. I've been trying to make this video for a long time. I wanted to make a video that said, I can live on a ball and you can live on a ball, but we cannot live on a ball. The reason for that is it would be possible for one person to live on a ball, but as soon as you add a third person perspective, so once you get past you and your buddy and you add a third person's perspective, it is proven that we don't live on a ball. But if you go to Mr. Skeptic for your truth, well, you're going to get told the same lies science is told for 100+ years. Many people have tried to use the idea of refraction to explain the results of the Bedford level experiment. Please pause the video if you'd like to read this entire explanation by Robotham. I will read just a small part now. If the object, a shilling or other coin, is placed in a basin without water, there is no refraction. Being surrounded with atmospheric air only, and the observer being in the same medium, there is no bending or refraction of the eye line, nor would there be any refraction if the object and the observer were both surrounded with water. Refraction can only exist when the medium surrounding the observer is different to that in which the object is placed. Armoured showed us earlier how when you stick a stick through the water that it shows some sort of refraction. But was the boat that Robotham tested in the water, or was it in the same air 8 inches above that the telescope was? Also in this little text segment here on the screen, he then tries to explain how the tests were done that show the negligible differences observed because the two locations were 6 miles apart. Now the ocean could have a huge temperature and density difference, but the chances of the same thing happening at the Bedford level are almost laughable. He then scientifically reaches the following conclusion. Hence, it has been concluded that refraction had not played any part in the observation, and could not be allowed for, nor permitted to influence in any way whatever the general result. Samuel Roe Botham.
They say that you see the mast go down last. It's literally just the way your vision works. It's perspective and atmospherics.
Correct. It's the way your vision works. It's perspective and atmospherics.
The limit of your vision is supposedly 3 miles. And then after 3 miles, you're supposed to see the boat start to go over the horizon. It's funny that Neil deGrasse Tyson again explains that you can't see the curvature of the Earth from a plane because you're not high enough. The Earth is so big that you can't get high enough to see the curvature. Yet, you can apparently see a boat go over the curvature, over the distance of 3 miles, which doesn't make sense.
Are you fucking kidding me? Yes, you can't see the actual physical curvature, but you witness the effects of it. I can't see London from here because of the curvature, but that doesn't mean I can actually see the what? Is this a serious argument?
Did you seriously just say that you can't see London from here because of the curvature of the Earth? So you think if it was completely flat, you would be able to see through all the atmospheric conditions, all the mist, all the fog, all the dust, all the smog, everything. You'd be able to see through all the air. The only reason we can't see far is because the Earth curves away from us. Keep laughing at other people, because I can't say it enough. You are absolutely positively wrong. Don't know what else to say. Just keep hanging yourself. Check out this video called Empty Horizon. It will tell you all you need to know about boats going over the so-called curvature. It doesn't happen.
The thing is, when you look out and you see a boat start to go over the horizon, if you suddenly get a pair of binoculars and look, it comes back again. And once it goes out of the sight of your binoculars, if you get a telescope, it comes back again. It doesn't go over any curve of the horizon. One of the best examples of that is the Antwerp Notre Dame spire, which can be seen something like 240 kilometers away from the spire. So that should be over a mile below the horizon, and you can still see it. There's a place in Bolivia called Salar de Uyuni, which is a salt flat. It's literally 100 miles wide one way and 80 miles across, and it's perfectly flat. When it rains, you get an inch of water, and it looks like a perfect mirror. How does that happen on a sphere? It shows you that if you're one end of this salt flat, you can see perfectly clearly the other end 100 miles away.
So the reason I left that whole part in there is because it shows every single example he has of the flat Earth being observable is over water. You notice that? Every single time it's over water.
Not sure how much more incorrect you could be in this video, but there's lots of proof of other places that the exact same thing happens. Please watch this video by clicking the screen now. A Mountain of Evidence by John McIntyre, who wasn't a flat earther until he went and did the tests, which is true for all of us. For some reason, people think we just popped out of a cave and said the Earth was flat. We've looked into it. We've studied it. It's clear. Do the research. You'll see.
There are no images of Earth from space. The only one that NASA actually claims is a photograph was from 1972, and it's the famous picture. It's got Africa sort of near the top. And it's the same picture they've been using for the last 40 or 50 years in every textbook. Every other image is what they call a composite. It's Photoshop. And many of us have been looking at these images of Earth, including the one they call the Big Blue Marble, which was released in 2002, I think. Again, when you zoom into it with Photoshop, you'll see where they've used the clone tool in Photoshop to take a picture of one of the clouds and stamp it in various places around the picture. And they got lazy.
What he said here is pretty much true. There are very few photos of the Earth from space, but the one of Africa is not the only one. It's just the most famous and commonly used one. Galileo, which was a space probe, actually took several shots of the Earth as it was leaving, and there are actually several photos of the Earth as taken from the moon, but those are not complete photos. You don't see very much of the Earth, and it's not in very high resolution. Most of the complete photos of the Earth are actually composites that were taken from orbit and then had clouds added to them afterwards. That way they could control the environment and control the weather so that the better features of the planet weren't obscured by clouds. But this isn't done to hide the fact that the Earth is flat. This is done to get the highest quality, highest resolution possible photos of every region on this global photograph. Plus, it's exponentially cheaper to do it from orbit than it is from a probe that's sent feet away from the Earth. The most detailed and accurate modern photos of the Earth are taken by NASA's Earth Polychromatic Imaging Camera, also known as EPIC. That's right, there are EPIC photos of the Earth. And they're actually composites of only 3 photographs instead of a series of photographs. You can view both of these images on NASA's website, and it seems that they were both taken in July of 2015. Most of the complete photos of the Earth are actually composites that were taken from orbit and then had clouds added to them afterwards. That way they could control the environment and control the weather so that the better features of the planet weren't obscured by clouds.
Okay. Clouds added afterwards. Do you understand deception at all? Because all you're doing is making excuses for your religious beliefs. Now, here we've got an image from the actual White House saying that no one has taken a picture of the Earth since 1972. The date of this article is July 20th, 2015. And it says that just the second image ever had been taken of the planet. Now let's talk to the man who does the work. So let's look at Robert Simone. He is the one who made the blue marble. And you'll see here it says, our team is purely about communications. We translate data into a usable and understandable form. Our writers and our visualizers explain what we are seeing, and our web developers tell the world. Somebody asks him, what's the coolest thing you've ever done as part of your job at Goddard? Let's listen to this answer. The last time anyone took a photograph from above low Earth orbit that showed an entire hemisphere, one side of the globe, was in 1972 during Apollo 17. NASA's Earth Observing System satellites were designed to give a checkup on Earth's health. By 2002, we had finally had enough data to make a snapshot of the entire Earth, so we did. The hard part was creating a flat map of the Earth's surface with 4 months of satellite data. Rito Stocktil, now the Swiss Federal Office of Meteorology and Climatology, did much of this work. Then, we wrapped the flat map around a ball. My part was integrating the surface, clouds, and oceans to match people's expectations of how Earth looks from space. That ball became the famous blue marble. Let's listen to this little portion of video. All credit to one of the best flat Earth producers out there, and that is ODD. Here's the video.
Thousands of satellites supposedly orbiting the Earth. Why can't we get thousands of pictures? One shot with the whole Earth in it. Hell, we should have a channel on cable that shows the Earth rotating 24 hours a day, every day. Nope. Let's listen to NASA's very own Robert Simon talk about how we get our fake pictures of Earth.
In 1972, we saw our home in a new way. Apollo 17 astronauts snapped this picture.
It gave people the first look at their home planet as a single entity.
Last week, scientists at NASA released this. The shot is compiled from data from NASA's VEERS instrument, which orbits the Earth about every 100 minutes, taking measurements of light coming off the planet. That can be translated into ribbons of imagery like this, and then into one of these. And this is just the latest in NASA's Earth from Space album, which may be one of the most mind-expanding collections of images in human history. Then in 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it's a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command-Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Well, when you're selling something fake, the pictures are going to be fake because, well, they have to be. Let's get back to talking about Armoured. Do you think that Armoured believes in, dinosaurs? Of course he does. It's not even a question. Why not? Well, because Armoured is not a skeptic. He simply believes in his religion. He is the opposite of a skeptic. He needs to be renamed. He should be, going forward, be named only as Armoured. Simply Armoured. Because he certainly is not a skeptic. And that's the problem. Nobody is willing to go out on a limb anymore. They are afraid of being made fun of. They are afraid of their own shadow. So they will just keep believing and keep trusting in whatever science says without a question. But blind belief is called religion. The religion of scientism. Not a skeptic. So when you watch him struggle through videos in an attempt to debunk the flat earth, just know he can't. You can simply look up all your favorite sites, Wikipedia, Astronomy Today, Space.com, and all the rest of the sites meant to reaffirm the religion, and know exactly what Armoured thinks. If science says flat earth is a joke, Armoured thinks flat earth is a joke. If science says evolution is the greatest theory ever dreamed up, Armoured says the same. If science says that the stars that we see above our heads are actually other suns, the closest of which is 25 trillion miles away, then you can bet your last dollar that Armoured will preach it as if it's the end-all be-all truth of all truths. Not even thinking about any of it. I mean, driving 60 miles per hour every hour of every day would take you only 47.5 million years just to get to the closest star. Even at the speed of the supposed ISS, a whopping 17,500 miles per hour. I mean, remember that the fastest car goes 273, the fastest boat 318, the fastest passenger airplane 800 or 900, the fastest plane ever 4,000. But at that speed, which I promise you they're not going, 17,500 miles per hour, it would take you 163,000 years just to get to the closest star. If you believe that, you simply believe in what people are telling you and not using your head anymore. You've given up using your own brain. Recently, Joe Rogan brought up Eric Dubay because Eric is a skeptic who sees no real evidence for the existence of dinosaurs. So he brought in a paleontologist. Let's listen what they discussed.
Because it's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It's like people don't look as, why do people think the world is flat, or why do people think dinosaurs don't exist? Their Google Boolean search is, dinosaurs don't exist, or creationism is true, evolution is false, the earth is flat, chemtrails exist. They're creating their own echo chamber and preaching to their own choir.
Yeah, and then they have a message board, and they go on that message board, massive confirmation bias. Anybody that doesn't follow that line gets booted out. Let's play more of this, because it gets better.
Geez, Joe, I lose more respect for you every single day. Echo chamber, huh? Thank goodness science doesn't have a massive confirmation bias. Anybody that doesn't follow the line gets booted? That isn't anything like peer review, is it? Thank God.
This kind of the problem with you, Eric, is you are starting from an improper position. You are starting on a confirmation bias. You are stating from the beginning that dinosaurs don't exist, and you were using pareidolia and apophenia, the ability for humans to find patterns, in order to fit your bullshit, and then only cherry pick what belongs. That's what you fucking flat Earth. And the problem with this is, like I was saying earlier, because now the stupid minority has a voice.
Stupid minority, huh? You believe you find bones of animals that died 70 million years ago. Anybody who was on the fence about dinos need only watch this clown, Bam Bam Bigelow, the paleontologist, stumble all over his facts and nonsense and use derogatory language, insults, curse words, and all to try and prove his own preconceived notions. And dude, the yellow beard, greetings from Ansbury Park, or perhaps you're Tank Abbott. UFC, Joe Rogan, Yeah, Tank. What's up? See, what can't be seen by these scientists and NASA fanboys is they too only exist in an echo chamber, where apophenia and pareidolia rule, where you have started from the preconceived notion that the sun is far, the earth's a ball, space exists, orbits exist, dinosaurs existed. You are starting from a confirmation bias. You mean to tell me that paleontology doesn't cherry pick? So where's the discussion of the dinosaur bones that had soft tissue in the bones? Of course, nowhere, because testing them would bring back a date of less than 50,000 years. So who is cherry-picking evidence to prove their nonsense claims? I'll say this much. Did dinosaurs exist? Well, if you mean large birds and reptiles, sure. Did they exist 67 million years ago? Laughable. Do you know less time has passed between T-Rex and you than between Triceratops and T-Rex? See, evolution wants you to think of billions of years to get, well, us. But we evolved from muskrats in 67 million years. Still the only animal that can talk and build skyscrapers and airplanes. Do you think that a hamster in 67 million years will be able to do what humans do today? If you do, then simply accept and admit that you're a religious believer. You worship a religion.
All, I don't know how many million people subscribe to the channel. Every single flat earth dipshit is going to go, 61,000 people. Okay.
Look at that 300,000 views. And here's the thing. Check out the comments. The comments, he curates
thumbs up,
the comments.
thumbs down are almost identical. Look, 3486 to 3493. Are you kidding me? All the things that Captain Jackass just rattled off.
Captain Let's call him Captain
Oh, God. I don't, just something. I mean, yeah, I stole that. I stole Shit Gibbon from a Trump thing, but
Shit Gibbon.
None
of them once claimed to find a complete skeleton either, so all their work involved reconstructions. In fact, to this day, no complete skeleton has ever been found.
Bullshit.
And so all dinosaurs are reconstruction.
Bullshit.
All right, well, let's hear it again then, if it's such bullshit. One more time.
In fact, to this day, no complete skeleton has ever been found.
Bullshit.
And so all dinosaurs are reconstruction.
Bullshit.
All right, well, Dubé said to this day there's no complete dino skeleton that's ever been found. You call bullshit. That means we do have a 100% skeleton. So tell us about it, Tank Abbott.
Sue in the Field Museum is, not 100% complete, 98% complete, including formerly unknown elements from any other tyrannosaur. I believe a commercial paleontology group just found like a 99% or almost a 100% complete dinosaur. We have found entireties or near entireties of animals.
No complete skeleton has ever been found.
Bullshit.
And so all dinosaurs are reconstruction.
Bullshit.
You see, last time I checked, actually telling the truth is not bullshit. What is bullshit is the echo chamber that exists in the scientific and intellectual world, where the truth is bought and paid for, and where truth must go through a filter that is pruned and cleaned to be exactly what the establishment wants. And it's been going on a long time. In 1819, Ernst Cialdini reflected back on his struggles for the recognition of meteorites. While the Enlightenment, the 18th century intellectual movement that examined accepted doctrines of the time, had brought certain benefits, he felt it also brought with it certain intellectual problems. He said, now scientists thought it necessary to throw away or reject as error anything that did not conform to a self-constructed model. The very success of scientific experiment and theory had led to a misplaced confidence that what was real was already within the circle of science. What was outside of it, therefore, what did not conform to the scientists' theories, could be dismissed by invoking scientific authority and by ignoring or ridiculing any observations not supported by it. The entire Copernican principle, which everything is built on, is wrong. George Ellis described it best when he showed that because astronomers and cosmologists want so bad to be right, and since the Copernican principle or the cosmological principle allowed them to move Earth from the center, they made that the absolute fact and said everything must go through this master filter. It is a religion in every sense of the word. If I see that by pressing keys on my keyboard that it causes a letter on my monitor, that's great. But I can't take that and apply it to my entire house. Well, I could, but I would be proven wrong. But what if I go to turn the volume up on my speakers and there is no button to press? I need to actually realize that some things need to be turned on or off with knobs and dials. But what if I had already decided and already put it in school books and told everybody that it was a fact that everything operated off the press of a button? What has become of the universe is the equivalent of me saying, well, I still have to press this knob, and I guess dark turnigy must make it turn. This is the problem. Gravity no longer works in their model. Relativity is a joke. The Big Bang, a scam. Evolution, total nonsense. But they put it in schools. They taught it as fact. It took one generation. And the result we get is Trevor Valley, Red's Rhetoric, and the artist formerly known as Armoured Skeptic. Well, I know you guys won't listen to me, and you refuse to do the research, so enjoy the last few moments of fun before the house of cards that you worship in tumbles and falls. We all believe the lies. We all did. But some of us have enough brain left to see deception. And yet some of you still believe in NASA no matter what. So, enjoy the pipe dream, although I'm telling you that none of it exists in reality. And to Armored, I tried once before, you turned me down, so I'll do it again. If you want to have a hangout and discuss some portions of your religion that you really should look into, hit me up. I'm available. I remind the rest of you guys to please do your own research. Don't believe me. I could be some sort of crazy flat earther. And to everyone else, thank you for watching as always. Please like and share. If you want to support, you can check out my Patreon. It's in the link below. Also, there's a link that you can use before you shop at Amazon. Helps us out. We make like 2%. Lastly, a very special shout out to Jaren, and Jaren. To the haters, get a life. So be kind, don't lie, and open your mind. There's truth inside. This has been Jarenism. Till next time. Get out.
Problem is that we're taught as children this ball earth lie.
Oh.
What? What? Did I miss the punchline again? It's just, why do I remember you being funny? I just remember last time you being funny. I don't know. I think you have a little bit too much shoe on the head.
You might ask as a child, what about the people in Australia? They're standing on the bottom of the globe, won't they fall off? And your teacher says, no, gravity. And you go, oh, okay. And you never go back to that question.
Yes, because you have a child's mind and children don't understand how gravity works. But then you grow up.
But when you go back to it as an adult and start looking at it with a critical eye, the whole thing falls apart.
Only if you never learn how gravity works.
And you know how gravity works? So the PhDs who specialize in this kind of thing, they can't tell us what gravity is. But you understand it? You can tell us what gravity is? Try this one. Show me one time, just once, in a lab, in a vacuum, a ball spinning, holding water to the surface of that ball via gravity. I'm not even asking for multiple times, which science would require anyway, it being repeatable. I'm just asking you one time. Just show me it once in a lab. Go ahead, Sir Skeptibit. Show us. Oh yeah, you might want to talk to your hero about gravity.
What is gravity?
I have no idea. Okay, next question.
Wow.
No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. We can say what it does to other things. We can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know.
The thing about the spinning Earth is looking at the stars. Directly above the axis of spin is the pole star, Polaris, directly over the North Pole. And we're told that the reason that all the stars spin around the North Star is because the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour.
Do you have any idea how far away those stars are?
I think a better question is, do you know how far those stars are? Are they suns? How do you know? Ah, because someone told you. Point for Armored Skeptic. He sure is skeptical.
This is another one of those things that flat earthers tend to completely throw out of their equations. Polaris, for example, is somewhere between 350 and 450 light years.
The horizon has complex electronics in it to make sure it knows where it is on the Earth and it compensates. But I went to the manufacturer of the artificial horizon and they confirmed to me that it's completely mechanical, nothing electronic in it whatsoever. So it's literally just a gyroscope that can freely move. That right there is proof to me that planes fly over a plane.
That anecdote doesn't make any sense. So you found a pilot who doesn't know how gravity works or his equipment works. That doesn't mean that the planet is flat.
Of course. Because the non-pilot, non-PhD, non-seeker of truth, the religious dogmatist, the armored skeptic says so. I mean, come on. If somebody is skeptical, wouldn't they do actual research? Not just looking into what does the mainstream say is true, because I got to repeat that. So what is it, Armored? You afraid to look into truth? If not, then please do the research that needs to be done so that you can understand the truth behind flights and gyroscopes. I mean, there's so much truth out there. You just have to take a little break from making fun of Christians. Just take a little break from it. Look into the other stuff available to you. You'll be very shocked at what Flat Earth has brought to the table. For example, we've had the following people come forward with Flat Earth facts.
The subject matter experts we've had so far: United States Navy missile instructor, Air Force navigator, Marine Corps sniper instructor, Navy submarine chief, Army artillery radar operator, Australian intelligence officer, American flight instructor, industrial engineer specializing in valves and seals, careers surveyor of over 32 years, that's a planer surveyor, not that geodetic crap, international shipping expert, corporate travel agent, air traffic controller, United States Army master gunner, aviation and ground training combat expert, USDA surveyor, also a planer surveyor, 32nd degree Mason, etheric science researcher, and tonight it is going to be a commercial airline pilot captain who's going to talk about the gyro system. So let's get right to it, shall we?
If you haven't got to hear that yet, I highly recommend it. You just need to click the screen now to go to that video. It consists of a pilot telling us some interesting facts about the gyroscope and who's in charge and what happens when they go down. So check
years away. They're not entirely sure. Polaris, for example, is somewhere between 350 and 450 light years away.
All right, let's think about this one for a second. Polaris is somewhere between 350 and 450 light years away. So these astrophysicists and cosmologists that you follow blindly tell us that the North Star is 350 to 450 light years away. They aren't entirely sure. Well, I mean, that's not a big deal, right? It's only 100 light years that they're off one way or the other. Can't be very many. I mean, a light year is 6 trillion miles times 100. That's 600 trillion miles. 600 trillion miles. All right, so let's discuss this 600 trillion miles. I mean, that's just the amount they're unsure of. So watch this pitch. Okay, this is coming at 100 miles per hour. All right, keep your eye on it. So let's watch the next one so we can get an idea of how fast 100 miles per hour is. Let's look how fast this ball is moving. Wow, that is coming in there really quick. All right, so one more time, let's watch this last pitch so we can get an idea of exactly how fast that moves. All right, so we got that ball moving 100 miles per hour which would mean in a day it would go 2,400 miles. That's about the distance across the United States. So if we wanted to look at a year, in a year it would go 876,000 miles in 1 year. Okay, so the distance of 600 trillion miles, that would only take that ball 684,931,506 years. So again, a ball going as fast as we just saw it would take 684 million years to just go the distance that science says, Polaris, it's either 350 or 450. It's in between. All right, maybe there's an easier way to show it. Let's try a trip from Los Angeles to New York. Okay, and let's say we're going on a brand new super duper plane. It's never been released before. And this trip, which is 5,000 miles round trip.
Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaronism, back with another video for you today. So here we go again. I honestly thought I'd never have to see Armoured Skeptic struggle through another attempt at debunking Flat Earth. Well, I was wrong. Again, the Armored one, Sir Skeptizip, made a video, and I'm unsure as to whether it's supposed to be funny or if he's really trying to be informative. He certainly missed his goal, unless that goal was supposed to be a poorly researched public affirmation of the scientism creed. Anyway, here we go.
Baby better Papa Bear. Baby better Papa Bear. Do you read over?
Okay, I'll spare you that opening, because I don't know what seemed like years, where he goes back and forth with a mama bear and a baby bear and saying over. Anyway, it's terrible. He's discussing the Bedford level experiment, which he butchers, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But to start, we first have to discuss how far the Armored one has fallen off the skeptic path. Let's look at the definition of skeptic. All right, skeptic, a person who questions the validity or authenticity of something purporting to be factual. Okay, it seems to make sense, but what I think he thinks it says is a skeptic is one who questions and makes fun of anything that the mainstream citizen-funded science claims is untrue or pseudoscience, and an unwavering adherence to the religion of scientism. Belief in the unbelievable simply because science says it's true. A devout follower of the faith. Now, before we get going, one of the main reasons this video is important is because by the end of it, you will 100% understand the Bedford level experiment and why it went badly. You will also see Dave Moore do an excellent job on a late night talk show. His channel is linked in the description. And you will get to also see what kind of a religious nut Armoured is. And by the end of the video, you'll be able to see why he's going to have to change his name going forward to simply Armoured. And this place here is hiring if Armoured runs out of Christians to bash. Now, let us begin.
So in my search for some conspiracy-level things to debunk, I found this hilarious show.
What about the people in Australia? They're standing on the bottom of the globe, won't they fall off?
So we're in for quite the ride.
I don't know about you guys, but it's becoming comical to me to see these people who basically have been told they can live on a ball. That's it. Not shown, just told in school we can all live on a ball because the gravity pulls us to the center. There's no up and down in space, which makes a lot of sense. That people can just laugh at somebody, laugh it up. Believe me, Sir Skeptibit, that there are more and more people every single day who are laughing at you. Okay, we can totally live on a ball. I'm sure. Freemasons, they say so. Because there's no up and down in space, remember? Gravity pulls everything to the center. Okay, except helium balloons. Those get to defy gravity. And boats on the bottom, they're not really on the bottom. See, they're at the top. Same with people in Australia. You think they're at the bottom, but to them, they think you're on the bottom. Because they're on the top, but I'm on the top. And you're on the top, and so is that guy over there, he's on the top. Everybody's below my horizon, everybody's below your horizon. This isn't metaphysical at all. This is reality. Science!
a pilot is flying around the curve of the Earth, then he should be dipping the nose down. Every 5 minutes he should be dipping the nose down to stay around the curve.
Yeah, and who's to say that he's not? Planes have to make constant adjustments to stay level. Between wind, turbulence, and topographical changes, planes are constantly adjusting their pitch.
Oh man, that's some great evidence. Thanks, Skeptic. We got it now.
If a plane has a gyroscope and it starts following the curve of the Earth, the gyroscope would stay upright, which means the artificial horizon will start to roll backwards. But it doesn't. That's absolute proof that a plane flies over a flat surface rather than a curved one.
No, you absolute silly goose. That's not how gravity works. Gravity is a result of Earth. It doesn't work independent of the Earth.
Because I asked the pilot on my last flight, did you ever notice the artificial horizon rolling backwards? He said, no, but the artificial